Hi.
Hey,
So what's going on here?
so my sister, his daughter, has been missing for 5 days now.
Okay.
I seen a boatload of flies behind the shed, and when I pulled things out, we have these bags.
Smells like death in there.
Don't make me think she's there. Don't tell
When
me she's there.
23-year-old Kevin Marzejka discovered bodies wrapped in plastic bags in his storage unit, he had no idea that this was just the beginning of a mystery that would change everything forever.
That doesn't look normal. Let's grab a mask.
I've been imped for 18 years. This one will stand out in my mind as being more gruesome, if not than any one I've ever seen.
The twisted motive behind this unspeakable act will soon unravel, revealing itself as the catalyst for a dark and sinister secret. It all began on the tense afternoon of Sunday, August 26, 2018, when the Clinton police received a disturbing call at exactly 6:06 p.m. When the police arrived in Clinton, Michigan, they had no idea that the disturbing nature of the emergency call hadn't even begun to scratch the surface of the horror that awaited them. By that time, Kevin's sister Danielle and her boyfriend Saren had already been missing for 3 days. While they were still searching for them everywhere, something strange began to unsettle Kevin and his father, Robert. The shed in the backyard had been emitting a foul odor for several days, but that morning, the smell became so unbearable that Robert could no longer ignore it. When he couldn't find his own key, he called Kevin to bring the spare. What they found inside was far more terrifying than anything they could have imagined.
See what we got first, and
Yeah, I mean, we don't even know what we have.
that doesn't look normal. Let's grab a mask.
There should be 2 in there, right?
And let's do this. You want to do booties?
Yes. Just in case.
I got seniority. I'll do like.
Inside were mattresses and piles of household bags stacked on both sides, but the real cause for concern was the 2 large black bags in the corner, swarming with flies, reeking with a foul, sickening odor, bulging with strange shapes and protruding veins, and a glimpse of a blood-stained hand. When officers arrived
we don't
in
have to
Clinton,
cut. We're
Michigan,
confirmed.
they had no idea that the disturbing emergency call had barely scratched the surface of the horror that awaited them. By that moment, Danielle, Kevin's sister, and her boyfriend Saren had already been missing for 3 days. While the search for them continued everywhere, something strange began to disturb Kevin and his father, Robert. The shed in the backyard had been giving off a foul odor for several days, but that morning the stench became unbearable. Robert could no longer ignore it. When he couldn't find his own key, he called Kevin to bring the spare. Inside, they found mattresses and piles of household bags stacked along both sides. But the real source of concern was the 2 large black bags in the corner, infested with flies, reeking with a terrible stench, bulging unnaturally with visible veins, and the glimpse of a blood-stained hand. The officers knew their work was far from over and decided to search the house for any additional evidence. The shed didn't appear to be the actual crime scene, prompting them to wonder if something had been hidden inside the house. They searched every corner, from drawers to floorboards, but everything seemed normal. Now ready to begin their investigation into the double murder, they sought to understand the evil nature of the attack. What made it even more disturbing was the clear sign of suffocation, duct tape wrapped tightly around the victims' heads, with 5 layers of plastic bags in total, including black contractor bags and shopping bags, leaving them no chance to breathe. The bodies were so decomposed that they couldn't initially be identified. When officers carefully opened one of the bags, they found several blood-soaked items inside. Among them, a small hammer covered in blood, which they immediately suspected as the murder weapon due to the severe head trauma seen on the victims. But the horror didn't stop there. Further search uncovered a roll of duct tape soaked in blood, as well as bloodied sheets, likely used to wrap the bodies before dumping them in the shed. This was, without a doubt, a carefully planned murder. By this time, news had spread, and friends and family gathered outside the house. Inside, police were still trying to make sense of what had happened to Danielle and Saren, who were officially still considered missing. Every new clue only deepened their sense of unease. To gain more information, officers decided to speak with a coworker and friend of both Danielle and Saren. They both worked at National Coney Island, and on the night of their disappearance, Thursday, August 23rd, they had a late shift. Their coworker dropped them off at home afterward. However, the next day, things took a strange turn. Danielle didn't respond to any messages, a first for someone who, like most teenagers, was constantly on her phone and carried her charger everywhere to stay connected. Her silence was concerning, but the real alarm came on August 24th, when neither Danielle nor Saren showed up for work. By August 26th, with no sign of either of them and no way to contact them, Robert, the father, decided it was time to act and filed a missing persons report. That same evening, a deeper sense of dread settled in as he noticed the strange smell near the shed. Later that night, officers also spoke to Robert to gather more information. They quickly noticed something odd. Though it was late, the investigation couldn't wait. Kevin and Robert were both brought to the Clinton Police Department at 11:57 p.m. for questioning. Kevin was fully cooperative throughout. As investigators explored different theories surrounding Danielle's disappearance, they heard for the first time since the emergency call the name of another brother, Robert Jr. The mention shocked them. With everything that had happened, why hadn't Robert Jr. been present at this critical moment for the family? At this stage, suspicion began to focus on Robert Jr., who lived in the same mobile home with the family. But before moving forward, they needed to know more about Robert Sr. and his strange behavior. Kevin revealed that his father could act like two completely different people when he drank. As they dug deeper, the case became more twisted. Robert Sr. seemed increasingly confused. He had earlier claimed he opened the shed with his own key, but now his story changed, shifting into something darker. He became a person of interest. Still, investigators remained curious about Robert Jr. Surprisingly, Robert Sr. seemed determined to protect his son, which only raised more questions. Why was he protecting him? What were they hiding? Could there be a dark family secret behind the murders? Despite growing suspicions, there wasn't enough evidence to detain either of them, so both were released, and the night ended in mystery and uncertainty. The next day, August 27th, the autopsy results came in. They confirmed that the victims died from suffocation due to duct tape and blunt force trauma to the head, likely caused by the blood-covered hammer. The most devastating blow came when the bodies were finally identified as Danielle and Saren. After years of dating, Saren, who had been living with his mother, Diana Bryan, an hour and a half away, had recently moved in with Danielle's family. From then on, they all lived under one roof, never imagining that their future would be stolen from them so tragically. As news of the murders spread, endless theories emerged about motives, suspects, and scenarios. But certain chilling details stood out to investigators. The bodies showed no defensive wounds, suggesting that Danielle and Saren didn't resist. They were wrapped in layers of plastic without anyone noticing, and locked in a shed that required a key to open. It seemed unlikely this was done without the help of someone close to, or even inside, the family. After connecting the dots, the investigators' first stop was the mobile home where Danielle and Saren had lived. Armed with a search warrant, they had no idea they were walking into a house of horrors. At first, everything seemed normal. But once they entered Danielle's room, the picture became clearer. It wasn't just a cover-up. Someone had spent considerable time cleaning up a large amount of blood. Then investigators moved to Robert Jr.'s room, where things took a far more disturbing turn. Inside his closet, they found several blood-stained items, apparently tossed in hastily in a desperate attempt to hide evidence. Blood was everywhere, from the rooms to the doors. Anything touched bore marks from bloodied hands. Detectives now had strong evidence pointing to Robert Jr. as deeply involved in the murders of his sister Danielle and her boyfriend Saren. With Robert Jr. still missing, a manhunt began. When investigators looked into his background, they discovered he had long struggled with severe mental health issues. After their mother Jill died in 2011, when Robert Jr. was only 17, he began hearing voices and behaving erratically. His condition worsened over time, leading to multiple hospitalizations for erratic behavior. He had been diagnosed with bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, and paranoia, but consistently refused to take his prescribed medications. As a result, his mental state became increasingly aggressive, marked by hallucinations, paranoia, and rapid, manic speech. All this information was extremely alarming, and soon finding Robert Jr. became of utmost importance, not just to solve the case, but also to ensure the safety of others. It didn't take long before investigators managed to track down the taxi driver and bring him in for questioning. Without wasting any time, the detectives headed to Wendy's, which functioned as a bus stop, and they quickly noticed several surveillance cameras covering every corner of the area. They requested footage from August 13th, and Robert Jr. appeared in the videos casually wandering around. What caught their attention the most was how calm he seemed. It was as if nothing had happened. There were no traces of blood on his clothes, and his behavior made it hard to believe he could be involved in such a brutal crime. Through the surveillance footage, he was seen boarding a bus. They quickly obtained the bus number and requested its internal camera footage. Meanwhile, a completely different picture emerged from what Robert Sr. had told the investigators. He claimed that Robert Jr. was with him all day at work around the city. But seeing him board the bus clearly proved that wasn't true. This raised serious suspicions about the father's involvement. It appeared that he was deliberately covering for his son, and perhaps he knew more about the murders than he let on, or was even hiding his own involvement. The investigators were convinced that Robert Jr. was on the run in his white Ford F-250 pickup truck. The Clinton police contacted the truck's former owner to help trace it, explaining that the vehicle might be linked to a double homicide. As time seemed to move painfully slowly for the grieving families, the investigators worked at maximum speed. On the morning of August 21, 2018, at around 10:03 a.m., they received a phone call from Officer Anthony Duncan in Toledo, Ohio, who had reason to believe that Robert Jr. might be in the area. Soon after, detectives received crucial information from local homeless individuals who reported seeing Robert Jr.'s white truck parked near a local grocery store. However, by the time police arrived, Robert Jr. was nowhere to be seen, though all his belongings were still inside. Even after thoroughly searching the vehicle, they were unsure if he would return, but one thing was clear: he had been in the area recently, giving them a new starting point. Determined not to lose the trail, Toledo police began searching the local streets near where the truck was found. They combed through hours of surveillance footage, and just when it seemed like a never-ending search, they stumbled upon a discovery by chance. Robert Jr. was seen entering a store where he bought a phone, likely to make a quick call to someone. Shortly afterward, he returned the phone, neatly repackaged it, and exchanged it for cash. It was clear he was being extremely cautious with every move. He was later spotted at a nearby gas station buying some food. At this point, Robert Jr. could have easily slipped through their fingers since they had no more surveillance footage to track his movements. But one critical insight saved the entire investigation from collapsing. They realized Robert Jr. didn't have any close friends to rely on. So, if he planned to escape Ohio, he would need a new ID. Knowing that security checks at stations require ID, they shifted their focus to reviewing surveillance footage from local train and bus stations. Finally, their instincts paid off. While reviewing footage at the ticket window of a bus terminal, they spotted Robert Jr. again, this time buying a ticket to Cincinnati using the alias Josh Bianca at 1:55 p.m. on August 18th. The bus was scheduled to arrive around 3:45 p.m. the next day. This breakthrough was exactly what the investigators needed. They immediately contacted the U.S. Marshals in Cincinnati to alert them and begin a sweep of the area to locate and arrest Robert Jr. the moment he was spotted, thereby ending the manhunt. Robert Jr. was not an easy target. As soon as he arrived in Cincinnati, his first stop was at the Greyhound station, where he asked an employee two important questions: where he could buy a phone, and where the library was located. It seemed he was following a carefully crafted plan and trying to stay under the radar. With this information, the U.S. Marshals quickly deployed several undercover agents to the Cincinnati Public Library, preparing to arrest him. They had to proceed with caution. Robert Jr. was on high alert. If he sensed anything suspicious or noticed officers in tactical gear, he might try to flee. The officers began tracking Robert Jr. as he moved through the library lobby. A security guard was seated at the entrance near the elevators. The marshals showed the guard a picture of Jr. and instructed him not to approach the suspect because he was dangerous, asking him instead to observe his movements closely and remain alert. Shortly after, Robert Jr. took the elevator. The officers watched closely, waiting for the right moment to move. He was in disguise, wearing a blonde wig and carrying a coffee cup, trying to blend in. But as soon as he returned to the lobby, the officers sprang into action. They quickly approached Robert Jr. and caught him completely off guard. He froze in shock, realizing that his time on the run was over. U.S. Marshals arrested him there in the lobby, finally putting an end to the manhunt. At last, on August 24th, the authorities had the suspect right in front of them. Their top priority now was getting a confession. They knew they couldn't rush the process, so they adopted a careful approach. Investigators worked to make Robert Jr. feel comfortable, build trust, and make him believe they were there to help him. Robert Jr. showed little interest in explaining the murders or even acknowledging the gravity of what he had done. He seemed distant and detached. But when he asked if he could contact his brother Kevin, investigators saw a glimmer of hope. They thought this might be the moment he would finally open up and confess everything. But Robert Jr. had already made up his mind to plead not guilty, something that deeply frustrated the investigators. They needed his confession to build a strong case against him, and without it, things became more complicated. Nevertheless, the investigators remained determined. They knew they had the right suspect in custody and were prepared to do everything necessary. They proceeded to arrest Robert Jr. and charge him with the murders of his sister, Danielle, and her boyfriend, Sharon Bryan, confident that they had enough evidence to hold him accountable. After 6 emotionally charged days of trial filled with pain and heartbreak, the jury returned its verdict on November 13, 2019. It took them only 40 minutes to reach a decision. Robert Marzejka Jr. was convicted of first-degree murder for killing his sister Danielle and her boyfriend Sharon Bryan. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. While the family's grief was immense and their loss could never be undone, the verdict brought some sense of closure. They could now cherish the memories of Danielle and Sharon, knowing that justice had been served. What are your thoughts on this case? Was mental health the reason behind the murders, or is there something more sinister lurking? Could Robert Sr. have been involved in the killings too? We'd love to hear from you. If there's a case you'd like us to cover, don't hesitate to leave your suggestions in the comments section below. And don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel for more true crime stories. See you next time.